Now, we've all heard of the megalithic portal. I don't know about you guys, but to me it's been a lifesaver over the years. First place you want to go if you want to find a megalithic site is the megalithic portal. And Andy Burnham is the genius behind this fantastic aid. And not only has he done that, they've also just brought out a new book, The Old Stones. And I've got to say, it is a fantastic book, absolutely brilliantly laid out, and sites all over the country in there. And they just won an award for current archaeology. Looking forward to hearing your talk. So, welcome.
So, hello, yes, I'm Andy Burnham, and to start us off, we have Christine Clark, who I think many of you know, who was a great help putting the book together with some of the areas of Northern England and other areas. So I'm very grateful to Christine for her help, and she's going to start off our talk, and we're doing alternating as we go. So Christine goes first.
We hope. So, I first became involved in the megalithic portal, and the reason for me being here happened 10 years ago. Andy doesn't know this story, but sometimes you're compelled to go to places, aren't you? You've just got to go. She says, being technically inept. So I just had to go to Callanish. Or Callanay, okay? That's not Callanay number 1, that's number 3. So, if I'm going to go on 3 trains and an aeroplane, when I get there, I want to see more than one site. So what do? You go on megalithic portal and you see what else there is to see. I'm not going to be able to do all of that in a week, I thought. So we goes off to Callanish, and I'm heavily involved in sites. Drag's husband, who thinks, yeah, with the stones, aren't there? So for the first time, he picks up the camera because he has to have something to do while I'm wandering, going, oh, look at the energies of this. And he starts taking snaps. And when we come back, because the megalithic portal is somewhere where really encourages, it only exists because of people like you and me. Somebody, I assume it's Andy, I don't know, but somebody put it up in the beginning. But after that, it is all contributors, and everything, as long as it's not derogatory, is welcome. So, he posts this picture. Never taken a photo in his life, and what comes back? One of the comments from one of the regulars, this is the best photo on the portal. Was I miffed? That's an understatement. So, goes and tells me mates, we're into stone circles and energies and all of that. What does my mate say? She says, you're going to stand in front of a lot of people talking about this stuff. That was 10 years ago, and I said, yeah, all right, what do I know? All I went was just like a lot of you. Go to a site, really enjoy it, come away, have the experience, whatever. What have I got to say? Well, here I am 10 years later. Fast forward to 2017, and last year, for those, the common theme was synchronicity. And this is part of synchronicity. So there I am, May 2017, sat in front of my computer thinking, in a year's time, I'm going to retire. What do I want to do? Real strong intention, not necessarily meditating and setting out, but real strong intention. I want to be involved in the megalithic portal more. It's something I've used for a long time. I'm going to do more on it. Right. Not long after, Andy posted a message. Anybody available to help with the book? And I thought, ooh, I can do that. I like looking at sites. I might be able to choose 1 or 2. And the rest of the day is history. I became a site selector, and as Andy has already said, I did a lot of the sites, well, I did the sites for Yorkshire, in the Midlands, Scottish Isles, quite a bit. And then thinking, oh, well, that was really good, but it's over now, isn't it? When something came through and said, can you actually check the text? So that was my next bit, was to check the text. And I, did some more text checking until it was ready to go to print. So that was my role in the book. When we first come across all of these sites, it's usually with a sense of wonder. How did they do that? What did they do it for? One of the things I will say that I forgot to say about the book is that on the surface, it seems as though it's an encyclopedia, but there's lots and lots of information in it. And this is a quote from Vicky Cummins, who's a reader in archaeology at the University of Central Lancashire. And she's talking about dolmens, of which Lanyon Coit is a beautiful example. Dolmens are early Neolithic stone monuments, where the main focus appears to have been on the lifting up and the displaying of a large capstone. They were sometimes used for the deposition of the dead, but that doesn't seem to have been their primary function. Instead, the builders of these sites seem to have wanted to demonstrate their prowess at raising and supporting these massive stones. These sites have capstones that are far in excess of the size required simply for creating a stone box for a burial. The largest dolmen, Browns Hill in County Carlow in Ireland, has a capstone that weighs over 110 tonnes. I'm not going to do the metric and the imperial, I'm just doing old money imperial. Most dolmens have their capstones supported by just 3 uprights. This creates an amazing effect, an enormous stone seemingly almost floating in the sky. Because the stone was chosen as the capstone, because the stone chosen as the capstone was often a thick and chunky object, the effect of a massive stone lifted up in the air is further enhanced. And this was almost certainly deliberate on the part of the builders. Likewise, the stones used to support the capstone are often thin and slender, with just the very smallest part possible touching the underside of the capstone. Again, this was surely deliberate, done to enhance the effect of lifting up of a large stone. It is hard to imagine how people with only Stone Age technology were able to lift up such massive stones. Visitors to these sites today often express amazement, and I think this is exactly what the builders intended. These were people who, after all, had very little experience, supposedly, of built architecture. These dolmens would surely have appeared as the most incredible thing in prehistory. It's also worth considering where these sites were located in the landscape. Much has been written on the landscape setting of sites, and dolmens are rather unusual compared to all other early Neolithic chambered tombs because they're located in a range of settings. And although this must have been in part down to the availability of suitable stones, we know that the landscape was, in many places, literally covered with glacial erratics deposited by the ice sheets. So the monument builders had plenty of rocks to choose from. In some areas, stones close to the summit of the hills were picked, and this is the case with many of the Cornish dolmens, as you see here, known as coits. However, while these sites were apparently deliberately skylined, there were others, such as those in Southern Ireland, that weren't. And this is one in Brennanstown, Southern Ireland. And these can be tucked away at the bottom of stream valleys, harder to find, and they come as a surprise when you do come across them. Some sites like Pentre-Ifan are also located in relation to other features such as rocky outcrops, and they may well have been important to Neolithic people. And it's easy to imagine that they thought these as special places, perhaps the homes of spirits or otherworldly beings. So that's Vicky Cummings's thoughts on these stones. But perhaps a precursor to the dolmens were prop stones, such as the golden stones in Yorkshire. And Andy's going to say a little bit about that.
Yes, so these are really unusual sites because what are they? We can't date them because they're just stones. But they are clearly, they've been arranged. It would seem like prehistoric people have deliberately set these up. This is, as I say, Yorkshire. David Shepherd's been researching these. And as Vicky said, then there's an aspect of performance here, I think. So it's actually raising the stone and displaying it, and it's like a show of prowess, I think. So the performance of setting the stone up is, I would say, just as important as the remaining monument. But are these proto-dolmens the beginning of a tradition, or are they memories of the old tradition, or are they something entirely different? We have no idea, but there do seem to be a lot of these prop stones and similar things around that people are just recognising. So do keep a lookout for such things, because I think there's a lot more to be found. If you do the button. Yeah, press the oh yes, the second one is Lesconnich. So this is a similar thing in Cornwall on Lesconnich, which is north part of Bodmin Moor, and this is again just a stone that's been propped, but it's called Lesconnich Quoit because it's probably pretty likely to be man-made. But again, that you can find these all over the country, and I could talk a lot more about Lesconnich, but I'll hand back to Christine for a bit more of that.
So I asked what were the question, what did they do that for? And one of the things that we know, although it's difficult to answer that, is that with a lot of these places there is a sense of mystery and a sense of the mystical. And Lesconnich Quoit, you have to excuse my pronunciation, I come from Yorkshire, but Lesconnich Quoit is one of these places. Different sites have different atmospheres, and many have a sense of mystery and or a sense of the mystical. One of our contributors, Room, describes, when walking into a stone circle, you may notice a change of ambience, perhaps a deep feeling of peace, or maybe the wind has dropped and there's a change in temperature. Everyone has their own personal experiences, so what you may experience is going to be different from what other people experience, or you may not have anything at all. So Roy, one of our contributors, said of Lesconnich, "From the moment we arrived at Lesconnich, we felt we were in a special place, a place of wonder and great importance. To stand on the top of Lesconnich Hill, you can't help but feel that you're in the centre of a world that was once a kingdom, an enclosed world with only a hint or speculation of the possible world beyond." At the megalithic complex of the Hurlers, Mary Gordon says, "Heavy mists rolling make for an otherworldly experience. Unnerving to watch the stone circles dart in and out of the fog, not the fog moving, but the stones themselves." Another phenomena that people have noticed at some stone circles is that the way that if you count the stones twice, you never get the same number. Or if you count them in one direction, the number differs if you go around the other one. And the Rollright stones are a typical example of this, but I know that there are many, many others. Some people have found that each site has a boundary or boundaries around it. At the Ring of Brodgar, some people can discern 3 boundaries by a change of atmosphere at the edge of each band, at the top of the ditch, the bottom ditch, and at the top of the inner bank. Many people report different sensations from touching the stones, and Maria was talking earlier about some of her experiences. And these can range from pleasant tingles to electric shocks. You might identify warm or cold spots, bands of different sensations, or a pulse or heartbeat of a stone. Some people, as Maria says, have been literally thrown off their feet through contact with a megalith, where others experience a flood of insight and knowledge akin to a sudden information download. More subtly, the sense of eyes watching you and the feelings of a presence. I have terrible effects on electrical equipment. I think it is just me. But one of the things that we do know is that other people have horrible effects, or the stones seem to have effects on the electrical equipment as well. So you may get electrical or temporary camera failures, battery problems. A guy called Serig has known a virtually dead battery go on working well past its point where it should have given up. And the camera was the strangest one. In one occasion, the camera worked fine on a nearby stone row, but in the circles and between the circles, the image was absolutely awful. All distorted and blurry, washed out. Outside the circles again, they came out fine and were shot on they were all shot on the same focus. So that experience is very odd. And a guy called Sem had an experience of this at Kingscoint. A set of batteries failed at the site, but then worked back at the car park. And me and Callanish, well, that's the story in itself. I wondered why the batteries kept failing. The number of times we recharged those batteries, by the time I came home, even the camera had died. It just wasn't having any of it. And as well, some people feel a real affinity to a site and are drawn to it again and again. And the site that I'm drawn to again and again is actually the one at Thornborough. We'll talk later on about Thornborough. It's been the topic of this conference. But when you talk, I know a lot of you here have had various experiences, but how do you learn how to experience the mystical? So these are sort of some of the instructions. So to start, first of all, you shift your consciousness by approaching the site as a sacred space. You're not walking into Asda, all right? This is sacred. You ask permission to enter and listen for the reply. If you're told, no, this is not the time, I don't recommend that you go any further. You might find yourself flat on your back. What I personally do is because I am approaching the sacred, I give thanks and enter the space respectfully and with honour. One of the things that you might then try doing, and we don't know whether this is originated or re-originated by Maria, but she suggests try leaning against a stone just being supported by your head, as demonstrated well here. Or just put your hand on and notice what happens next. When I was at Callanish, I stood with my back against the stone, and it was almost as if I became part of the stone, and I was no separate from the stone nor the circle. And it was a really strange experience, and it was like I could hear voices going on around me. And there was somebody literally stood by my ear, apparently. I wouldn't know. And I could sort of hear their words. But as for anything else, I was totally oblivious. There are lots of reports of healing and fertility rituals associated with a wide range of sites, particularly around hold stones, and we had some cracking photos of Neil demonstrating hold stones yesterday. Many of these sites are made from or involve large pieces of white quartz or have quartz within them. Many excavations have found scatters of or broken pieces of quartz or even a quartz pavement on ancient ground surface. Rune describes her experience at Dullo. I was suffering from a fair bit of back pain in my hip as I walked or rather hobbled into the circle. I was near the centre just taking in the atmosphere when I heard 3 short sounds, one after the other. I had no idea what they were, and it certainly wasn't traffic noise nor any sound I could place. Immediately after, the pain disappeared and I was overjoyed to be able to walk normally and really enjoy my time in the circle. For those into working with crystal energies and quartz as a master healer, as well as having many other properties, so it comes as no surprise to me that quartz is integral to or found on so many sites. Like Maria was saying, according to Darville and Wainwright, dolerite, such as the Preseli blue stones, has a long and respected healing tradition in Wales, and it can be found at many Welsh holy healing wells. So some therefore think that the blue stones of Stonehenge were placed there as part of that healing tradition. And there are a notable number of blue stone chips and scatter in and around the graves at Stonehenge, and many of the people who were buried there showed evidence of serious injury and illness. So for those people who are interested in this aspect of the site, the Megalithic Portal has a specialist discussion forum that visitors can access, and this is Sacred Sites and Megalithic Mysteries. Over to Andy.
So yeah, carrying on with quartz. So Pen Maen Ware, and we were talking about Wales. This is one of the highest points of Wales. I'll just get my notes back. And this is right on the top of a mountain. And it's a quartz stone again. This is West Wales. So someone must have taken that up there. I don't think that was up there originally. And the other interesting thing about this stone is that looks like an animal, I think, and people have commented on this. And it's a real quartz, genuinely large piece of quartz with, the little nodules and so on you get up there, and that is on the top of a mountain. I'll make sure I press the right thing. Got you. Okay, so moving on to people making these dolmens. They didn't just use the local materials, as with Stonehenge. They were selecting stones with particular colours and designs in mind. And this is based on work by Penny Foreman, who's done an entire PhD on this, with looking at colours of stones. And she started looking at Bryn Cethley D and has gone on to look at other sites. But she's mapped out the different stones, and I've got to pass that around. That's the more detail of the stones. And so you've got the top view and the side view, and you've got dark red stones, and you've got the grey, you've got pale grey, you've got red earth as well. It's a very, very red earth up at Bryn Cethley D. And the blue schist is the column which that's the column you can't quite see, which is not a petrified tree. It is actually they've tested it, and it's blue, it's local blue schist stone. But you've got this deliberate arrangement of multi-colours of stones, and you also get this up at the Clava Cairns with different coloured stones and various other places. So this is another bit of research you can do yourself, is to look at the different colours of stones and see what you make of it. So Stonehenge, of course, I'm not really going to talk much about Stonehenge. We've people have said, why was it located where it was? There's many ideas about that we can talk about. There's ideas of being alignments there before Stonehenge was there, and this seems to be increasingly the case. So Durrington Walls is, of course, north of Stonehenge, which is where the people were living when they were at Stonehenge, when they were building Stonehenge. They were coming, it seems, in just in the winter time for celebrations around the winter solstice, it would appear. And the other thing that has come from recent archaeology is that people have been coming from all over England to Stonehenge. You can look at the people's teeth, and what you can see is that they were not local. Many of the people building Stonehenge, they were coming from probably as far away as Thornborough and elsewhere, down possibly every year or every, like a festival time. And they were coming down, they were living in this village at Durrington. And again, you can tell from looking at the pig bones that have been left there that they were feasting, because you find these burnt bits of bone. And they weren't, you find only old, fully grown pigs. You don't find any youngsters. So they must have been bringing these pigs down with them from wherever they came from, and bringing them down and slaughtering them and having their amazing time. This was people coming from all over the country. The more we see, the more work is done, the more that seems to be the case. So, ridgeways. This is the kind of traditional view, is that people were walking along these ancient paths along ridgeways and such like. But what we find is that in the last 10-15 years, there's been so much archaeology done over so much of the country that what you see is that even in the valleys where the traditional thinking is that there were wolves down there and it was all great carpet of trees, and that people were walking along the ridgeways to get from place to place. But what you actually see is that now there's been so much development, so much digging, and so much looking for sort of Neolithic type settlements, that they come up all over the place. So that there's not this business of going along the hilltops, and is really not the case. That by Neolithic times, that the land had been pretty much cleared. So it was the first sort of ecological disaster, or major ecological change right back in Neolithic times, and people were living all over the plains, and you find this. So that it's clear that everything had been cleared, and so that this makes the sort of ridgeways much less important, because people were going all over the place and travelling through various other routes to do. Of course, I haven't really touched on axes coming from Great Langdale and over to Thornborough and down to Stonehenge, and they had long distance paths, but they weren't necessarily just on the ridgeways. So this is our megalithic portal information which has been put onto Google Earth. It doesn't show that's coming back down to Thornborough. I didn't do the whole country because it just slows down because there's so many of them. But this is looking at Thornborough. So you can load this stuff in yourself and look on Google Earth. These are all the different points. So you've got the Cursus, top to bottom, and then you've got your three monuments, the three henges. And this is now moving to Google Street View. What you do is you get the little yellow man that you may have seen on Google Maps. You drag him down onto the road, and you can immediately get the view of Thornborough, this being Thornborough Central. You can see the great banks there, but you can do this all from the computer. We've got many different sites that have, you can see what's going on from the roadside. And then going back up in the air, you can get another view of the three monuments. This is the wooded one, Thornborough North. And again, going down to the nearest road, and a quick look at that. So this is a really fascinating thing you can do if you're not so mobile, and if you want to just have a look in any time. There's a load of this on Google Street View. That we've loads of monuments are available to look at. So yes, on to Thornborough with wasn't that a slick transition? So what we see, this is a plan from the Book of Thornborough. Just my next bit. So a very complicated site with Now, Jan Harding has done a lot of excavation up there over many years, and they've looked at all these different features, and this down here was the very earliest. This is a triple-ditched round barrow, which is a very unusual thing. And this seems to have been the first thing. So this is not a Bronze Age round barrow, this is a Neolithic round barrow, which is again very unusual. And this seems to have been the first site that was built there. And then secondly was the cursus there, and then overlaying that is the three henges. And then following that you've got this pit alignment here, which is, you can't see it there now, but what's been going on there is this giant posts being put in to create a timber monument. And what's also interesting is that's not aligned with the other stuff, so that there seems to be a specific alignment going on there. And then after that there's these Bronze Age barrows going in, so the Bronze Age people were revering this site over many thousands of years. And also they were putting burials into the side of some of these other monuments. So this barrow has people have, 1,000 years later, have gone and added their own, sort of made their mark on the ancient monument by adding another burial to it. So I could talk loads more about that, but I'm just going to talk about the archaeoastronomy. So you can see the alignments here. So it's getting my light. So what they used Sky Map Pro, which is one of the program where you can map out all the stars, and then they did a sort of overlay of the ground, looking at all the alignments. So there's various programs. I'm trying to think of the name of the other one. There's a free one you can also do this on, which will come back to me. But essentially they found alignments. The cursus on the east end aligns to the rising of Murfax and Pollux, two stars, at a particular time of 3500 to 3000 BC, because the sky obviously changes over time, but you can wind the clock back and look at what the sky was doing in that time period, and that's when this cursus was built, because they know that from the dating. So they've looked at what stars were important and being focused on, and it does seem that you've got an alignment of a rising of Murfax and Pollux, and on the west end you've got 7 different stars setting. You've got Oritac and Alnilam and Mintaka, which are the 3 white stars of Orion's belt. And this is on the cursus, the western side. The other thing to say about is I think this may have been mentioned, but the Thornborough henges were covered with white gypsum. So when that was new, that would have really shone. So there's a suggestion that maybe they were lining up with their shining monuments to line up with the very white stars. And what you can see is these are entrances, are all pretty much aligned the same way. So what they did was they assumed that people were going to be standing in the middle of the henge, because you saw from the video the banks are pretty high. I'm sure many of you have been there. So if you imagine in the night time, it's obviously pitch dark in the Neolithic, and you're naturally focused up to the heavens. So it seems incredibly likely they were looking at alignments with stars, and obviously we know about summer solstice and such like, but stars it seems quite likely as well. So you've got Orion's belt, and then at the henge entrances of the henges, you've got 12 stars, including Sirius, at around 3000 BC that are highlighted, and then the north and central henges, which is a slightly different alignment, align on the midwinter solstice sunrise. Now there's also this suggestion of the Orion's belt echoing in the 3 henges, which you've probably heard about. The other interesting thing about Orion and Orion's belt is, which all seems to point to this being quite likely, is because Orion rises in the direction of the Yorkshire Wolds, which is where you find many axes have been buried and have been ritually put in graves and such like, and also that seems to have been where the people who came to worship and gather at Thornborough, many of them came from the Yorkshire Wolds area, so that was like their sort of home world that you're looking back on, and the idea of Orion rising and aligning towards the home world this is archaeologists talking. This is not Earth Mysteries stuff. I think this is really significant that since I started 20-30 years ago, a lot of archaeologists take some of this stuff pretty seriously, and it's really remarkable. So yeah, looking at homeworld, and also Orion, of course, is someone that you start seeing around harvest time, and then he's there in the sky through the entire of the winter, which is long winters are going to be a natural focus, I think, for looking at the sky. So this is Tom Navery in Aberdeenshire. It's a recumbent stone circle. So again, you've got similar things going on. This is other archaeologists looking at this again, based on excavations by Richard Bradley to get the dates. And so what you've got here is, it's Stellarium, that's the free one. So if you want to download that and give this a go yourself, you can plot the stars out and you can wind the dates back, and you can overlay the plan in the correct direction, and anyone can do this really. And this is Liz Henty, who's another PhD researcher who's been working on this and has published all this in Archaeos well, they call it skyscape archaeology these days. So this is trying to get archaeologists on board a bit more. So this is the subject of skyscape archaeology is now the buzzword for it. If you want to sound like you know what you're talking about, like me, sound like, of course. So looking at Tom Navery. So as I say, they got the dates, so they set this all up, and what you see is this is looking across the recumbent stone. This is the recumbent stone and the two flankers. And what you see is very interesting, because looking across, again, this is winter nights, particularly focused around the winter solstice time. And you get this, and Liz describes it as a light show, really, if you imagine it being pitch dark in Neolithic times, with watching these coloured stars rising. They actually rise over the recumbent stone, and you've got white stars here, and this is white, and you've also got coloured, these are red, so you've got the colours of the stones seemingly echoing the colours of the stars. So you've got Betelgeuse and what's the other? Those are the other red ones up there. But as I say, as Sirius is over to the right, and as the evening goes on, and as the days go on, this sort of moves around. But you get this kind of rising over the recumbent stone. Which again, this is archaeologists talking about this stuff, so this is really good stuff. And then the moon it's quite well known that you get the moon effects, which I won't go into, but they're quite strong suggestions of moon rises over these stones as well. So this is oh yes, I should have shown that one as well. This is different coloured stones. And this is just a front view of Tom Navery. So at this point, I hand back to Christine again. So
Andy's talked about Thornborough and the amazing alignments. I just want to go back to Thornborough a second. I'm not going to go and flick back through the slides, so don't worry. As a site selector, it's like, how on earth do you decide what is going to go in the book? And the biggest criticism, and I'm sure Andy's the same, that we get, but you haven't mentioned this one. So I thought, while we're on at Thornborough, I'd actually explain a small amount of the process that we went through. So basically, Andy said, can you help us sort the sites in Yorkshire? So he sends me this great big database. And I ended up with 333 sites in North Yorkshire to choose from. And I had to get them down to 10. So you can imagine there's a couple just, that were just missed out. Now, one of my passions is Thornborough Henge. So it was a no-brainer. The one at the top of the list has to be Thornborough. And that's where everything sort of, for me, evolved from. What I didn't know was that Thornborough was going to get such a prominent mention in the book. So at the time, I thought, we must have Thornborough. But while you're at Thornborough, what else are you going to see if you've gone to Thornborough? Well, not far is this amazing rock art at West Agra. These are stunning motifs which are hidden by trees and bracken. They've been known for years but are only formally recorded in 2003. Now these are on private land, but they're not far from Thornborough. You hear about Thornborough, you hear about the curses of Thornborough, but you don't hear much about the amazing rock art there. This is another photo of the rock art, and there are cut marks visible on 10 rocks, and there are 2 more unusual carvings, including one resembling a stylized human figure. And of course, if you're in Thornborough, then you've got to go down to the Devil's Arrows. Now, I find this quote absolutely amazing. The legend says that these stones were bolts thrown by an irate devil aiming for the Christian settlement of Aldeburgh. Well, these predate any Christianity. So what the devil was happening all those years ago, I really don't know. For those of you that are not familiar with the site of the Devil's Arrows, there are 3 massive stones that remain of this dramatic stone row. The stone row is 570 foot long. The stones range between 18 foot and 22 foot high, and there's a further 6 foot in the ground. It's thought that this central stone here was one of a pair, and there may have been a total of 5 stones originally. I could talk a lot about Yorkshire, but the book covers an awful lot of things. And one of the other places I was involved in, because I was so much of a fan of Callanish, and that's where it started me off, I offered to choose the sites for Lewis and Harris, amongst others. So we'll just fly up to Lewis. So you see a bit of Perthshire on there. That's Perthshire showing, and then it goes up to, Harris, Lewis. When we land on Lewis and Google Earth, we stop there, we are? Yeah, go a bit further. We end up with the Trucial stone. It's there. X marks the spot. Go along the road. And there it is. And this is a really good site to go to if you're not that good on your feet, because as you can see, you can stop the car, and if the weather's not very good as well, you can stop the car and look through the window, and you're just as impressed as if you're really close up. So there we are, Trucial stone. Said to be the largest standing stone in Scotland and is easy to spot as it is near the main road. It reaches 20 foot in height and is around 6 foot wide, and there's around 6 foot still underground. No one actually knows the true purpose of the huge stone. Archaeologists are still unsure of how it was erected, and no one really knows its true purpose. Some say that it marks the grave of a Norse prince who died in battle close to the stone. I would suggest, given the age of the stone and the arrival of the Norse, they're a bit out in the dates, and what's more likely is that this Norse prince was so highly thought of that they buried him near the nearest monument. And there is actually evidence that there was a battle here. So yes, a Norse prince may be buried near here. However, he came second. So why the stone was there, we still don't know. The other people have suggested it was a sea marker because the nearby beach to this stone is one of the very few safe harbours in the area. And it is thought that it was originally surrounded by a stone circle, and the stone subsequently broken up and used in lintels and field walls. And so when you go to it and you get out of the car, because it's stopped raining by now, you can actually go and see these stones and go stone hunting. Oh, there's one. And oh, yes, I see. Yeah, right. So I would say that if you go to Lewes, this is a must-see site. But as I said earlier, my main reason to go to Lewes was to go to Callanish. This, to me, is the most incredible stone circle I have ever seen, because it's not a stone circle. And it is actually in the form of a Celtic cross. Given the fact that it predates Christianity, can I suggest that the Celtic cross is based on the alignment of Callanish? That's my personal view. I'll leave it to you to think. And one of the reasons of going to Callanish is the unusual alignment to the lunar standstill. Now, I'm good at some things, but trying to get my head around lunar alignments is beyond me. So all I'll say is, please read the book. That will tell you what a lunar standstill is and how you best see it. And from Callanish, and I tried to get a photo of this and I couldn't get one that did it justice, so you'll have to believe me. But from it can be seen a range of hills known as Sleeping Beauty. And my Gaelic is rubbish, but I pronounce it as Calachnach Montrech, or something like that. And it's best actually viewed from the stone circle of Arkmore, where she looks like a pregnant woman. Sleeping Beauty is also referred to by some as the goddess. And groups of women are known to walk the goddess trail from her feet to her brow. You have to start early in the morning and you get there quite late. I haven't done it. I get out of breath crossing the road, so there's no way I'm going to do that. But it is seen as a female ritual walk. Now, why would I choose to talk about this? Well, some year ago, a guy called Ian McHardy found that a wind farm was going to be built on top of the sacred goddess. So, what might stop a wind farm being built? Well, how about finding the evidence for prehistoric sites? If there's a prehistoric site there that can be proved, they may not build the wind farm. So he went in search of the wind farm and he found a cairn on a knee of typical Neolithic construction. So he was able to argue that building a wind farm there was to defile a landscape sacred to the goddess. Now, Canmore, which is the record of historic sites in Scotland, officially registered this in 2006. There's an actual modern-day summit cairn, which you can see, constructed on top of the earlier feature. If you want to go, and this is where, when I started doing this, I became absolutely fascinated by sites that were difficult to get to. Now, anybody who's been on the Isle of Lewis will know that the main road is a single track. Okay? It occasionally goes into two tracks, but usually it's a single one. And if you're lucky, you get passing places. So you can imagine, to get up here, you have to take a track off the main road. I suspect it's probably not particularly wide. You can get a car down it. But once you get to as far as you can get on this track, then you have got to walk up 6 miles up a very steep hill with gradients 1 in 8 to 1 in 9 with boggy ground in places. And sort of reading this and I'm thinking, you know, not only why do people go and build those things there, but why are we silly enough to go up that grueling hike to see if there's anything there? Well, that's us, isn't it? We do things like this. And so one of the things that I got out of doing this book was I actually started looking for some of the remote or most difficult sites to get to. And there weren't sites that I'd chosen, but as I say, I was a checker, so I had to check the text. See, it's raining again. And some of the texts that I checked were around Orkney. Here's a map of Orkney. There is not just Orkney there. There is a whole load of sites, a whole load of islands. So, we're going to move to Rousay, just off the coast of Orkney. And while checking the Orkney site, I came across a reference to an excavation of a Neolithic building. We're not going to Rousay, sorry, we're going to Ede, which is near Rousay. But I came across a reference to an excavation of a Neolithic building at Green on Ede. And there was a comment in the text that said, not sure whether we can still go there, and I think the farm's up for sale. So, of course, when you look on the portal, there was lots and lots of information about this ongoing excavation. It was absolutely fantastic while it was going. But you couldn't put, go and visit Ede, go and visit this site at Green on Ede, because it's not the easiest place to get to find that there was nothing there. I thought, what do I do? Now, I know I'll email Ede and see what they have to say. So I did. And my email went to the new owner of the Green site at Ede. And she was able to confirm that this dig had closed. And the farm was up for sale now. But could we put that on the portal? Because what we don't want is people to go there and create problems because there's nothing there to see. But I was absolutely fascinated of like just how everything fell just into place. However, if you go to Ede, there is actually a rare 2-storey stalled cairn at Hunter's Coy. And the other one is at Tavistow Chuk. I think that's how you pronounce it, on Rousay, which is nearby. Now, a 2-storey stalled cairn has 2 separate entrances. So you see an entrance this side, and there's an entrance round the top to the top story. And originally, if you were in the bottom story of the cairn, you wouldn't be able to see the people above because there was nothing connecting originally. However, today they've actually put a ladder so you can get between the two. So you can't do sort of any, I'll talk after about potential experiments, but you can't do any experiments with these sites because they've actually compromised the integrity of what it was like. And nearby, at the Knowe of Yarso, this is another stalled cairn. And you can, it's just to show you really what a stalled cairn is. So it's got these big posts and these stone walls. Now, one of the things that gets me, because I like remote sites, even if I don't go and see them, Orkney gets the most publicity. But there's nearby Westray, and beyond that. So basically, you go from Orkney to Westray, Westray to Papa Westray. From Papa Westray, you get the boat and you get to the home of Papa. I'm going to bring this to an end now because you need your dinner.